the day. It is Wednesday. It's my favorite day of the week. It is the day we get the AAR report. It's Hump Day. Julie, I was at Oshkosh, which is the busiest airport in the world for 1 week. It's the big air show. 800,000 people show up, 10,000 airplanes. I had the opportunity to go every year. Flying, which is an aviation brand that I own, host a big party. We got the opportunity to do it. I love that. It's the one I'm working. I'm also playing as I'm up there. It's a lot of fun. But you guys had some really good conversations, you and Malcolm.
First, what's the coolest thing you saw there?
You know, I am really excited about the Junkers A50, which we're buying for the Motion Museum. It's this airplane made in 1929. And it was relaunched in the United States and built here in the U.S. But it's this old legacy airplane. And we're buying it for the museum as a display. And so I got to see the airplane that I'm buying there on display, which I'm really excited about because it's just this beautiful, gorgeous airplane. And we got to see the F-35s fly, which is always fun. Got to see a MiG-29 fly around. You know, I'm like, it's always, my problem is my wife gets mad because I come back with a list of
things you want to buy.
Things I want to buy. And unfortunately,
I feel when Will goes to an audio show in Chicago every year.
Is that sort of the same thing? He's got his target list. I think it's a dude kind of thing, right? I guess women do the same thing when you guys go into like a fashion store. Like, what is if airplanes are my weakness, what is your weakness? Is it handbags? Is it jewelry? Is it cosmetics? Like, what is nothing?
I mean, I like buying stuff for our house. Like, I think it's fun.
You're a home's goods kind of person.
Yeah. My daughter's like, you need to stop buying things. Like, you're going to look granny in our house if you could. Because I just like am into like, I don't know, just like little things that make it like feel like ours and a little bit whimsical.
So you're like, taking you to a home store is really like, it's hard to get you out of there.
Yeah.
My wife is home goods is where she goes. And like, she always comes back with stuff. And like, we don't really need this. Now, she would argue the same thing about my airplane tickets. By the way, the Boeing, for anyone who goes to Oshkosh, it's still going on. It goes on until Saturday and Sunday. The Boeing has the best merch store of all of them. It's a huge, it's probably $1 million. They got to spend $1 million+ dollars. They have it. But they have this amazing merch store. And I always go there and get stuff for my kids. So it's amazing. You can see the F-35s flying around. You see the Raptors. You know, just the whole air show is pretty exciting. So, but you guys had good conversations.
We did.
You had Jason Miller.
We did.
One of the comments that he made is that you asked him about the cycle. His comment was that he thinks that trucking companies are aggressively adding capacity. I disagree with that. That's not what our channel checks say.
Yeah, I sort of set it up in that way too, like saying that to me, this cycle is different than any we've seen before, where we do, as an industry, tend to overcorrect, right? Yeah. Well, the market's great, we add a ton of trucks,
large fleets. That is a typical thing.
Yeah, large fleets grow, new entrants come in. Unlike prior cycles, that has happened because there's been significant demand. So you're adding capacity to meet that demand. This has not been a cycle driven by increased demand. This has been a cycle that has increased freight rates by lack of supply.
Yep.
So, and many of the reasons why we've had lack of supply is because of new regulation, new barriers to entry created, right? That have forced
drivers out of business.
Drivers out of the market, certain fleets out of the market, created, more compliance. So there's more barriers to entry. So I think it's going to be significantly harder to add capacity than in prior years. And I also think that large fleets are probably waiting to see how much capacity continues to exit based on this new regulation before they add it. And we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get into I believe it's our third guest. We'll talk about Class 8 orders and
he's
and
a survey that they did. He covers the OEMs and he'll dive into it. You know, the folks that I talked to, we're going to hear from earnings of the large asset truckload carriers. We got J.B. Hunt, Knight-Swift is tonight, KNX. They'll tell us about theirs. But again, what I'm getting from channel checks is that fleets are not expanding their fleets. They would like to, can't find the drivers, which is always the deal. We'll talk more about that. I also want to talk a little bit about Cassandra Gaines' interview. It was about liability. She had some great points that I think are really worth covering. We have a fantastic show today. We're going to get into intermodal conversion with Circle Logistics. We've got Zebra Technologies. We're going to talk about AI and what automation means in reshaping the warehouse and the operations. We're going to visit with Bloomberg Intelligence about new truck orders. We're going to ask him the question, are fleets expanding their operations, or is this just replacements? I'll tell you where my head's at on that, but I'd love to hear it from him. And then we have Aaron Graff to finish up the show. They had their earnings, really had a spectacular earnings report. And Aaron's always got information about the market, what they're hearing, and we'll hear all about that. So stay with us.
We kick things off with a major AI breakthrough that could fundamentally transform how freight gets moved across North America. J.B. Hunt Transport Services has partnered with Overroute to publicly launch an AI-led freight execution platform, following a year-long co-design process. The platform leverages AI agents to automate shipment coordination, reading live data, detecting exceptions, and managing customer communications while working within carriers' existing systems. Overroute's technology is now deployed across J.B. Hunt's business units, with AI agents working behind the scenes on millions of loads. The startup emerged from J.B. Hunt's collaboration with UP Labs, an October 2024 initiative focused on incubating startups to address common challenges across the freight industry, and Overroute is the first startup launched from this program. Meanwhile, Forward Air just pulled off a critical rescue of a massive customer relationship that nearly sank the entire company. The logistics provider announced Tuesday that it will continue working with one of its largest customers, which had provided notice in May that it might pull all of its business. A non-binding arrangement will allow Forward to keep half and potentially up to 75% of the $250 million account, with a memorandum of understanding keeping the current contract in place for at least the next 2 years. Forward's shares had plummeted over 40% following the warning that it might lose a customer responsible for 10% of its annual revenue, and the potential loss of business also foiled its plan to sell the company. Shares of Forward Air were up 19% in early trading on Tuesday following the announcement. Finally, the nation's busiest container port is about to become the testing ground for nuclear-powered maritime operations. The U.S. Department of Transportation's Maritime Administration will sign the first-ever agreement with the Port of Long Beach to test small modular reactors, known as SMRs, for commercial vessels and other potential uses at the port. The formal announcement is scheduled for Wednesday morning at DOT headquarters in Washington. Separately, Bluecore Energy, a startup headquartered at the Port of Long Beach, announced today that it has raised $10 million to develop floating, barge-mounted SMRs to power ports and eventually cargo ships. Bluecore Energy has delivered its initial barge and test reactor and is currently refining components while navigating the necessary engineering, regulatory, and classification processes.
So, Julie, Forward Air, big questions have been really hanging over that stock for some time, particularly the NVIDIA relationship. They never really said which customer it was, but everyone sort of knows it's NVIDIA. A lot of questions about that contract.
10% of their revenue, right?
Pretty substantial. It was the old Omni business was the one that, it was really their contract, and the questions about whether it would stay. They did do a disclosure a couple of months ago. It's been hanging out over the stock. We actually have one of their board members on FreightWaves Today on Friday, Paul Svenlin, who some of our audience may know him from STG. He was at Celadon. Let's say he wound down Celadon. He's now at Mallory Alexander. So we're going to hear from Paul on Friday. I'm going to ask him about Forward Air because I think it's really interesting that they have at least retained half that business. I'm sure they'd love to retain more.
So, and I think the part that we didn't get into that was in the broader story was that they were losing the business not based on service or other things, but based on the customer wanting to diversify. They had too much freight given to one carrier, right? Which is certainly always a concern on both ends, right? You don't want too much of your freight wrapped up with one shipper, and then vice versa. They need that too. Not all your eggs in one basket, right?
Yep.
But they should be able to save at least half of the $250 million. So that gives them still a lot of freight they need to replace, but that certainly is a lot better than losing all of it. So.
And I contend that Amazon is the best buyer for the airport-to-airport network. I still believe that Amazon should buy that LTL network to build out their LTL product.
And I would imagine for the dray portion, there's plenty of people that would be happy to buy it because there is such a shortage of dray capacity right now.
The combination of dray, airport-to-airport, some of the other things that they tried to bolt on that business, even Omni's forwarding business, I've always, I mean, look, obviously stock market struggled with it, but the airport-to-airport business is, again, I think is the best, maybe the best kept secret, because not a lot of people understand the value of that. That runs like an airline for the ground. It's scheduled, you have cut times, they run the truck even if it's got one box or full. It's just a really an asset that I think has a lot of potential that probably should be in the hands of either independent, spun off, or again, Amazon is who I think should buy it. But let's get into talking about modal shift. There's no better person to talk about this than our next guest, Nicholas Scheib. He's the director of premium transportation at Circle Logistics. Nick, I don't know if you have any thoughts about Forward Air on the expedite side.
No, I mean, they've definitely done quite a bit in the past here. Obviously a pretty big player with a lot of the automotive and expedited industry, a little bit of breaking news there too. So kind of had to do a little bit more research myself on what's going on.
Yeah, it's a big hang over their stock. It's resolved, but you really are involved in a lot of the intermodal business for Circle. Tell us a little bit about what you do for Circle and how you think about modal shift.
Yeah, so again, I'm Nick. I'm Director of Premium Transportation, do a lot within the chemical and oil central, as well as on the automotive expedited side of things.
So you got the automotive expedite business. That's obviously a very intensive business. Runs completely on its own sort of supply chain cadence. What are the automotive manufacturers thinking about right now?
With anything, obviously, with the craziness and the cost and what's going to be available, what's the marketplace going to do, and what's economics doing, there is a lot of toss-up that's just gone on in the last couple of months here. Obviously, everybody's looking at spend. They're concentrated on that, making sure that that's, a key focus here. But, at the same time, they're also looking at, can I keep my plant going at an operable cost, and looking at all facets there.
Yeah, so I know that, automotive expedite, they're one of the biggest users of expedite transportation, at least historically had been. Are they taking advantage of a lot of expedite right now? Is that changing? It seems like it's when automotive is really hot is when they take advantage of it most. What are you seeing from the automotive industry right now?
Yeah, I mean, there definitely has been a lot more that's come out here. You are coming off of some of the summer breaks, and even some of our customers, where years past they take a couple of weeks off during the summer as a summer shutdown to retool or maybe just catch up on supply of what they need there. We've had some of our customers that have actually stayed open the entire two weeks, or even a skeleton crew on some of them there. So a little bit different this year than even 5 years ago when it was absolutely crazy busy still. You saw that as an opportunity for them. So we definitely have seen an uptick on the spot market. You obviously are seeing a lot more with their dedicated trucks, either A, running behind schedule, or B, just not able to service the lanes that they've had, and those have definitely shifted into an expedited world.
Yeah, my understanding is it's really the reason the automotive is the commercial light-duty trucks is what's keeping them busy for some of the OEMs. Probably bonus depreciation's driving some of that. Every farmer and HVAC repairman wants that truck. The new, the Raptor. The joke is when oil prices are high, you see the Raptors show up out in the Permian. I imagine that's what's driving some of the demand. And the reason the OEMs are keeping their production lines open.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I mean, you look at, even somebody like Stellantis that's coming out with, quite a few new trucks out into the marketplace, even at higher oil prices right now. And typically you would see, the larger trucks, larger engines, sales decrease just because of those higher costs. And now you're seeing actually more opportunities of those different versions coming out here right now. So yeah, you're exactly right there.
Does that tell you a little bit about the economy? Are you feeling bullish based on what you're seeing and what you're hearing?
I hope so. Let's definitely.
You're not going to answer that.
Keep that. Yes, not yet. I still think we're kind of early into this, right? We had the big shift that happened here 2.5, 3 months ago when you kind of saw the market moving. I mean, obviously there's been predictions all throughout this year of the change, and it's been consistent. We're coming into Q3 here. Things still look pretty good for us, so we're excited.
So let's talk a little bit about intermodal conversion. There's certainly a cost savings element of that available right now in changing from over the road to intermodal, as we've seen truckload rates rise, particularly truckload spot rates, and the intermodal rates really just have not risen as much as those are. So talk us through why all shippers aren't rushing to go ahead and switch to intermodal, what some of those barriers are, and how you all work through that.
Is always going to be transportation spend. That's always seems like to be the key indicator. What can we have as whether we do it over the road or if we're going to put it on rail. But in that fashion, we can't also just judge the cost for the rail versus the cost for the truck, because there's obviously an abundance of other things that go into it, whether it's availability that's going to be on the rail, whether it's the drayage costs, the downtimes, there's a multitude of costs that goes in addition to rail versus a truckload than what just that dollar sign could look at.
So what are some of those other factors? Transit time, you mentioned, availability, open train slots, containers, I imagine tank cars, dray cost, obviously, then in the cost of storage if you haven't executed it appropriately. What are some of those costs that you really weigh out when you're looking at that specifically?
Yeah, no, that's definitely one, or quite a few that was numbered there. But, a lot of times it's also when things are stuck at the ports and whether they can get there and availability for them to even be able to get it out of the ports and get it onto the rail yards, or even if they're at the rail yards, if they're available. So the downtime, is something specifically, as we were talking with the automotive industry, they have to look at is, yes, is it a cheaper version here, but at the end of the day, if it's stuck on the rail for 5 or 6 days and I needed the container 3 to 4 days before that, it is operating at a higher transportation spend on a rate per mile for truck more important to us than the tens of thousands of dollars it may cost for them to have downtime at the plant.
Nick, we pay attention. We get the weekly AAR report, and we look at the bulk the bulk rail traffic. Obviously, tankers are a big piece of that. This year, they seem to be doing pretty well in terms of volume. What is your read in terms of how are the railroads responding from a service standpoint right now?
We've definitely seen where it's been limited to what goes on the truck versus what goes on the rail there. But we're also starting to see at the beginning of the year that there was a lot of those tanks that were not available at the time. And so we had a lot of our shippers that were actually converting that typically loads that do go onto the rail because of, whether it's just a cost, whether it's a keeping the product heated, whether it's a few other things that just because of rail car availability that they did have to make that shift, and we still continue to see that to this day. There's, especially in the chemical and the oil, there's obviously a lot that's going on whether the products are available, and so, whether that plant's able to make it in time to hit the rail cars as well has come into a huge factor here.
Now, are they using truck? Is this a fungible volume where they move? If they can't hit the rail in time, they're moving it by truck?
Yes, correct.
And what are the commodities that you typically are involved in? Like, what is the stuff that really they depend on you guys for?
A lot of it has to do with different oils, whether it just be the commercial oils or if it's transformer oils, additives, some of the different chemicals that we're able to do quite a bit, non-hazardous. But we're also starting to get into a lot of the wastewater that's coming off of this as well.
So that's really for the fracking. Are you seeing, with high oil prices, there's this big question about, is there increased activity in the Permian? Are you seeing anything that gives you optimism about U.S. oil production?
It certainly seems like that's the shift. Obviously, not to get into a political conversation here, but a lot with what's going on overseas here. We have a lot of customers that are looking at what are their options here in the United States to continue to service their customers. And that has definitely made a voice in things of prepping us to be available for them.
Yeah, I mean, look, United States, the Americas, I should say, are the one place in the world that is it's not in a conflict zone that you can get energy and derivative products. It's surprising how many people have missed that headline. Because if you're going to build an industrial economy, you need energy. That's the most important component into the industrials. And frankly, you got to get it from a place that you're not getting disruptions from. So I would expect to see more investment across that sector. Are you seeing anything in terms of like what it's going to look like in 12 months from now?
Couldn't say officially yet, but like I said, it definitely seems like our customers are prepping us right now that is their strategic outlook of where they're going to be looking for is having more energy based in the U.S., having it transferred here versus getting it from overseas and moving that as an opportunity that we're having to take it from there.
Now, how much of that is export versus just moving domestic to production facilities?
Most of the business that we're doing is domestic.
Got it. Yeah, I think Julie, I think about the importance of our energy sector in the United States and just frankly, how blessed we are to have so much energy availability and the ability to extract it. And I think, Nick, the policies have, the permitting has been challenging over the last couple of decades, a lot of NIMBYism across the country, but we're always reminded when we have an energy shortage or an energy challenge or prices that we need it. It is life, it is the economy, and it's great to see that companies are responding to it by moving freight that way.
Yeah, we certainly hope so as well. It definitely does seem a good tendency that we see in 26 and moved into 27 and 28.
Yeah, amazing.
So Nick, to sort of wrap us up with this, if a shipper is thinking about, you guys specialize obviously in chemical bulk, liquid bulk, you mentioned that. If they are thinking about the complexities of moving chemicals and what mode they should move it, what are some things that they often don't take into account that you bring to their attention that they should be thinking about?
Yeah, really just the requirements to be able to get pick up and offload. That's a lot of things that we get caught up with customers, obviously, from the initial sale of that product that's going out to them doesn't always correlate to what is needed at the sites. One of the things that we strategically do with our customers is whether it's a project or a spot load or, dedicated lanes, we want to make sure that we have all information of where our shippers are, where our receivers are, what requirements are going to be needed at those facilities before we're sending a truck in. Our biggest thing is we never want to delay production, whether that's production that's at the shipper and we have the right type of washes or the right type of equipment to load to, in transit and making sure that the product's kept in a safe and, conditioned manner for those tanks and not have any reactions to the final part of delivery and having all the information that we need to be able to offload at a sensitive time. We do a lot of projects where it's the startup, and so to us sometimes maybe we're having to wait at that receiver, but we would rather have all the components ready for them and go for them than them having to be waiting on us or having a specific component that goes on to there.
Great. Well, again, thank you so much for your time. That's Nicholas Shipe, Director of Premium Transportation at Circle Logistics. Thank you for joining us.
It is such a cool job.
Yeah.
Automotive and energy and bulk. I don't know. I'm a big fan of the bulk freight. I've talked
Cooler
about
than
it.
just moving diapers.
And automotive.
Yeah.
It's cool.
Yeah, it is.
These are the unloved parts of the freight market, I think, in some ways, because so many people get focused on CPG.
Yeah.
Like we do business with Walmart and Unilever. Those are great businesses, a lot of volume. I just think the hard stuff is sexy.
It's certainly interesting. Like
it is interesting.
different problems to solve. So, all right, we're going to take a quick break, and when we get back, we're going to dive into this owner data.
The world doesn't wait, so neither do they. Wheels on the interstate, boots on the site, hands on the shipment. We build for the world out here, and we build it with the people who live it. Ideas from the field, made real by world-class R&D to keep the operation sharp, the front lines safe, and the world moving. From one cab to a global network, billions of miles, trillions of data points, every one making your operation better. And we never build it alone. Samsara, built with operators.
Welcome back to Freightways Today. You know, Julie, I think about all the stuff that's happening in the freight market, and it feels like we're, middle of July, a little hot outside, or a lot of hot outside.
It's disgusting here.
It's disgusting.
It is so hot. I had to sit outside for 2 hours. My daughter had her first soccer practice last night for fall, which is crazy. It's July.
Isn't that crazy?
So we were outside for like 2.5 hours sitting out there because we had a parent meeting and all that first.
Yeah.
It is hot. It is really hot here.
Now, when do the kids go back? When does your daughter go back to school?
Like August 5th?
Man, it's
so early. Yeah.
I was watching the F3 commercial. Reminds me of the really.
It's almost fall. Yeah.
Fall is my favorite time of year. It's college football season. For those, we have NFL people who are like, oh, it's NFL season. I care about college football. That's really what, live in the South, sort of our thing down here.
Fall
in Chattanooga, by the way, is pretty epic. I mean, it's absolutely gorgeous.
Like I've liked fall, but like since I've lived here, it has absolutely become my favorite season. It's a full season here. It is gorgeous. F3 being in October is perfect. It's the perfect time to showcase Chattanooga and let people enjoy the weather here, where it's truly a real fall. I feel like in the Midwest, fall is like 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Here, it's a full season. It's gorgeous.
So get your tickets today for F3. And if you're interested in participating, speaking, demoing, let us know. We'd love to host you. It's a great show. Brings in the top innovators across the logistics and supply chain. It's really, if you are selling technology, offering technology, or looking to buy technology, it's really a show for you. That's why we call it the Future of Freight Festival.
Yeah, it is really great content, incredible networking, and a lot of fun.
And great food. Rather than having convention food, we actually give everybody a gift card that they can go buy. There's like 40 restaurants that accept the gift card that you can go and spend it. So it's like it's a food voucher, I think is the way you would think.
No conference chicken.
No, thank God. Like even, having done these
even
events,
done well in mass, it's just never that good.
Even going to places that have really good convention food and exhibit food, it gets, if you do this enough, you're kind of like, ugh. You're always surprised when something's good.
Yeah.
The bar is so low. And what people don't realize about events is that you're really only as good as the in-house caterer, because you don't get to pick the caterer. It's done by the convention center when you go to a convention center. Now, what we have done is we do, in our after parties, we do pick the catering service, so it tends to be higher quality food. But the best part is we give everybody a meal voucher, $100, and they can go have lunch, drinks, whatever they want at the 40 some odd restaurants that are around the Chattanooga.
Super close and walkable all around the event. Yeah.
So it's really great. We look forward to seeing you there.
All right, with that, we are going to get into the Sonar Update.
a blitz at the state level in terms of safety inspections across commercial trucks, Arizona and Nebraska and Oklahoma have reported doing their own blitzes outside of road check week to look for really anyone violating the safety standards required of trucks to determine whether these trucks are not roadworthy and whether the drivers are also in compliance. And this is a reminder that the compliance crackdown continues not just at the federal level, but also at the state level. And this is important because, as we've discussed frequently, the real effectiveness of all these regulations is all about enforcement. And really the states and the state Department of Highway Transportation, state troopers are really the ones that are going to be the ultimate enforcers of all of the DOT's rules. After all, if you don't have strong enforcement at the ground level, it's not going to matter what the federal statutes say. So this is a real reflection of it. We reported on it. Freightways reporter Noy Mahoney wrote an article about this particular set of blitzes taking place across the country. And of course, this is showing up in the freight data. We've been talking about the fact that there has been a significant surge of rejections over the past year. You can go back to really when the federal government started to make a real effort around better enforcement of the rules and ramping up their overall focus on truck safety and trucking compliance. Really last summer is when we started to see the freight market turn. Now, there's been some debate about how strong the volumes are in the freight market. I'm not going to spend time on that right now. I will say that no one doubts that the compliance crackdown is having a tremendous impact on the overall trucking market. Rejection rates are still above 15%, even though in July they cooled a bit. Trucking spot rates are near all-time record highs as shippers and brokers struggle to find available capacity. And when we see the compliance crackdown happen at the state level, it's a reminder that this issue or this movement is not just federal, it's happening across the entire country. There have been a number of state bills and state houses and representatives and the state governments to increase the level of compliance and regulatory crackdown, everything from increasing fines for non-compliant motor carriers to increasing criminal statutes and implications if you commit crimes, to seizing property and seizing trucks. All of these things are, in fact, more aggressive than they are at the federal level and will have a profound impact. Now, Secretary Bars, the head of the FMCSA, has said that his mission is to make sure that whatever rules are put in place and whatever rules that they decide to enforce is something that will hold up regardless of administration. Now, there's a lot of question about whether or not in a couple of years we get a new administration, perhaps a change in the political party that's responsible, will we see continued crackdown? And my answer is I believe so. I believe that this compliance crackdown and this regulatory tightness is being encouraged by all levels of the trucking industry, except those non-compliant carriers that would wish that these rules didn't exist or were trying to exploit them. But I think generally the powers that really drive the trucking industry and set the agenda care deeply about the compliance crackdown and want to see more of it. This is the independent operators, companies like OIDA and the SDBTC, as well as the American Truckers Association, TCA, et cetera. All of them want more compliance because it allows them to gain pricing power over the freight market and follow the money at the end of the day. This is what this is all about. If you have tighter compliance of who's operating, then you're going to have less available capacity on the roads, which is better. And I think that's really what we're seeing. We're seeing the large carriers care deeply about compliance in ways that, in terms of enforcement, that perhaps they weren't as focused on in the past. And because of that focus and that real amount of attention that's being put on it, and the fact that we know that during the Great Freight Recession that this is all, when you have light compliance, you're going to have a financial crisis that we've seen, the freight recession has been caused by too much capacity. No one wants to go back to that. Because no one wants to go back to that, they're going to continue to put pressure regardless who's in office. Now imagine an industry went and said they want more compliance. They want more rules. That is not going to change regardless of who's in office. Regulators love that when their own industry comes to them to ask for more regulation. So don't think that this current set of standards, this movement that we're seeing in compliance is short-lived. We're going to be in this freight tightness for some time. Regulatory crackdown is real. It's happening at the federal and state level. There's no catalyst to change that anytime soon. And I don't think, regardless of what happens in a couple of years, change in administration, change in party, I don't think it changes at all.
Yeah, Julie, I think at the end of the day, you got to follow the money. Follow the money, and the money says there's going to be more compliance crackdown. It's going to continue. It's not going anywhere.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it is in everyone's best interest to have a
Tighter market,
a safer, more compliant market where everyone's playing by the same rules, which is going to mean harder to add trucks and harder to add capacity, and some capacity continuing to exit. But while it might mean higher prices for shippers, it's nothing astronomical, and it's also going to mean safer, better service for them.
Yeah, I mean, look, shippers are able to pass these costs. It's relatively small, even when you're talking about doubling freight rates. It's still a relatively small piece of in consumer prices, something like 3%. So while it is an inflationary driver, it is not the primary. A lot of folks bring up what we saw during COVID, where supply chain crunched down. If you remember during COVID, a lot of the issues was you couldn't get things. And I was building a house in the middle of COVID and trying to buy stuff. You got a lot of, by the way, if you built a house, a lot of the stuff failed, because the manufacturers were using different components that they weren't familiar with, that weren't as precision engineered as what they had been, so they were having to take alternatives. So we've had a number of appliance and fixture failures that I think are largely related to the fact that it was COVID, it was a massive supply chain crunch, and I think companies were willing to pay whatever. And that drove inflation, not just the transportation issues.
Yeah, I had to buy a car during that time because I got into a pretty bad accident. Someone T-boned me, and first of all, getting that car fixed took 8 months because they couldn't get parts. So in the meantime, I got a car, just planning to sell that one when I finally got it back. And it was very hard to find a car. There was no inventory, right?
I had the same experience. We ordered, because we had twins coming. My wife had twins, and we had twins, I should say. We ordered the car in October, and the dealer said it would be within 6 weeks. And it was one of these long XL Yukons. And my wife went into labor 3 months early, and it was late February. We still didn't have an automobile.
Yeah, you got to get 3 car seats somewhere. Yeah.
I bought a Sprinter van because I couldn't get, and then finally in May, the Yukon shows up, and the dealer calls me and goes, "Hey, your Yukon's here." And I'm like, "Dude, I don't want it. I like the Sprinter van. That's a better thing." So we kept the Sprinter van. We didn't get the Yukon. But crazy times. But I think this is a different market. It may feel like it to some because of the tightness capacity, but it is quite different. Our next guest is going to talk all about AI inside the manufacturing supply chain and warehouse. We have Andre Light, the global strategy lead for transport and logistics at Zebra Technologies. For those that have been around the dock and the warehouse, you may know Zebra. I grew up printing on a Zebra printer. How are you doing, Andre?
I'm pretty well. How about you?
Doing well. Tell us a little bit about what you guys are doing in terms of investing in technologies to make the supply chain more efficient.
Yeah, first of all, thank you for having me. Maybe painting a bit of a picture. I know most people are familiar with what Zebra is doing, but I just want to use a couple of framing sentences here. So we provide the foundation for intelligent operations. So we make the assets, the inventory, the people that you have in your network visible, and by making them visible, provide an opportunity to utilize them in an optimal way. You can find us in 8 out of 10 Fortune 500 companies, and in addition to the printers you mentioned, the portfolio covers labels, handhelds, wearables, fixed infrastructure, cameras, sensors of all kinds. So we'd like to think about our positioning as providing the foundation, or our technology captures the data that provides the foundation for digitizing your workflows and optimally using AI, and that's the bridge then. We have heavily invested into developing AI capabilities, primarily on the side of what a lot of the market now calls physical AI. So AI that is being used by frontline workers, the people that load your trucks, the people that need to deliver. We have AI built into determining whether or not the delivery picture that is being taken, that starts to replace the end of service delivery scan that you see in a lot of cases. That picture, is that the right picture? Does that look good? In essence, we help your associates determining what good looks like. And once you know that, you can move on to the next step in the process. And that is something that our customers value a lot, more so than an AI that is focused on knowledge workers. So we're all familiar with the chat GPTs in this world. The AI I'm talking about is the AI that's being built into the workflows, allowing the work to go a bit smoother and providing the person who actually has to execute the task with an immediate feedback that they did a good job.
Andre, I really like the way you set that up. We talked a lot about AI at our recent summit, and a lot of the things we talked about is AI is only as good as what you're training it with, and the need for robust and accurate data. So it sounds like that is how you all are really approaching this, using all of your tools to really capture all of that data and then be able to put it into action with AI. Tell us what you all do beyond just end-to-end visibility, and then also when it does come to visibility, what are some blind spots that most people have in their supply chain that you all can provide visibility into?
Yeah, so I cannot underline that enough. Without real-time, clean, good data, a lot of the recommendations that the best algorithms, the best AI engines will provide you is just not good, because I don't want to use the old moniker that everyone knows, but good data needs to be provided in order to come back with good recommendations. But that is just the first step. A lot of our customers, usually your fault and cracks and mine, is we want stuff faster. We want to know where our deliveries are. Our customers, be that retailers, they want to know what is on the way, when it's going to arrive, etc. So making sure that you close those visibility gaps in your specific supply chain, knowing what you have, what condition it's in order to fulfill the customer needs and fulfill it fast, you need inventory accuracy levels that a lot of our customers struggle to arrive at. So visibility in and of itself is good to have, and you can do all kinds of analytics on top of that. But the challenges, the needs are driven by the consumer. I want to be able to know when the driver arrives. I want to know exactly what is on the truck, and not just that I have 20 pallets or 26, whatever it may be. I want to know what is on each pallet, and I want to know, potentially, depending on the commodity you're moving, what's in each box. So we're seeing an increased need for item level visibility. Item level visibility in real time is something that a lot of our customers in the pharmaceutical industry, for instance, but also perishables with short shelf life. A lot of our customers in that space want to know how long has it been, what's the lead time, how long has it been in the truck, under what condition, and especially where you have expiration dates involved. Can we make sure that we know what is available by when, and at what point do we need to intervene here? So not visibility for visibility's sake. Most of the if not all of the requirements that our customers come to us with are business objectives, clear KPIs that don't necessarily spell out that visibility is required, but it's one of the crucial ingredients.
Yeah, so you talked a little bit about tracking and understanding the time that a load has been on a truck and all that. So I'm inferring that applies to some of the cold chain solutions you all have. But can you talk a little bit more about the environmental sensors versus just the tracking and visibility?
Yeah, so environmental sensors, I mean, we see in addition to just location, additional requirements to understand temperature is one, but we start to see the need to understand what shock, if something has been exposed to shock or light, or on the food side to particular ripening gases or things like that. So the portfolio that we provide is a large one. The beauty of some of the recent developments is that we can provide a platform where all of this data that you capture in real time can be put and then further analyzed. So ideally, the data that is being made available through our devices will then find a home and can be used for further analytics.
Andre, the hardest thing in managing a warehouse today inside of operations is labor. It's something that is on the minds of every single company. What are you guys doing to help companies find labor, attract labor, and then retain it?
That's a very good question, and we've done we commissioned some studies to drill down on exactly that. And one thing we found out is that the associates on the shop floor actually value more modern technology. It's not perceived as a threat, what we initially thought. So I can only compare that to you starting a new job and someone handing you a 10-year-old laptop. So you wouldn't be happy about that. And by the same token, someone who works in a warehouse environment appreciates being exposed to or equipped with the latest technology. What does this technology do? Now we see with an increase of automation and a reduction in some areas of the number of people that you find on the shop floor, the remaining associates need to become a jack of all trades. They need to have a lot more knowledge about a lot more workflows, and that's not necessarily something that was available in the past, so or was required in the past. So how can we help these associates that now have to manage 3 or 4 workflows where previously it might have just been one, that now has been enhanced with automation, and we might find fewer people. So there are some AI tools that we have deployed onto some of our handheld devices that can help you access, for instance, standard operating procedures. That can help you. My favorite example is, in theory, you could look at an oil spill in aisle 12. What do I do next? I'm here 2 days. I'm here 2 weeks. How can we make sure that the people in those situations have access to 20 years of tribal knowledge what can we do to help them make the right decisions without running to the supervisor's office? So there's some AI options in that space that we're exploring, where agents or companions, interactive user interfaces where you could sit on the device that you can interrogate to get the answer to your question, and ideally in multiple languages, and all of this in real time. So providing the labor with the best possible tools to do the job right, and do it right the first time.
Yeah, I mean, that tribal knowledge is so important, and it's so integral in the logistics business. So, Andre, if I wanted to have Zippy, the zebra, as my companion, would I be able to do that?
Yes, you would. The interesting... say what?
Would he talk to me, or is it voice?
If you want him to, or her, yes, of course. So what I'm trying to get at is our customer mix. So we meet our customers where they are in their technology journey. Some of them are very mature, large organizations with fully staffed, talented IT departments. They might just be after the software development kits that sit, or the capabilities that any of our devices have, like detecting an anomaly, looking at a picture and saying there's something wrong here, or translation capabilities, or language output, like you just suggested. Some people have the ability to grab that and turn that into their very own version of Siri or whatever have you. Others would like a particular workflow improved and enhanced by AI, but they're more than capable to introduce that or include that into the application that runs the warehouse. That's a bit more mature in the technology curve. And then we have customers that have outsourced their entire IT, or their entire logistics, or their entire software management. Those people might need a full-blown agent, a full-blown companion like you described, and say, okay, here's my standard operating procedure. Here are my reference documents. Please, if you have a question, just use the device to ask it. And then the output would be either voice or text, whatever have you.
Very cool. It sounds like a lot of really cool options for people to think about, and certainly making their jobs easier. Thank you, Andre, so much for being here with us. We are going to take a break. And when we get back, we are going to talk about the AAR rail data that just dropped for a little bit before we get into our last two guests.
The drivers, dispatchers, mechanics, and crews who keep the world moving deserve tools that work as hard as they do. That's what Samsara builds, technology for safer, more efficient operations, made with the people who do the work. Samsara, built with operators for operators. Learn more at samsara.com.
The world doesn't wait, so neither do they. Wheels on the interstate, boots on the site, hands on the shipment. We build for the world out here, and we build it with the people who live it. Ideas from the field, made real by world-class R&D to keep the operation sharp, the front lines safe, and the world moving. From one cab to a global network, billions of miles, trillions of data points, every one making your operation better. And we never build it alone. Samsara, built with operators.
The super successful people are part of the 1%. They're part of that very, very small percentage. That's why I don't want you to do things that everybody's doing. I want you to do the small things that nobody else is doing. The people that are most successful in this business treat it like it's the only thing that's bringing income into their household. If you do that, then you'll have the same results. These people operate like they have no other chance. They have nothing else going. This is the only breadwinner that they have in play. I'm Adam Wingfield, and this is the Freight Waste Playbook. Become part of the 1%. Sign up for Freight Waste Playbook today.
Well, it's our favorite day of the week. It's the AAR report. This is the one that tells us about demand in the industrial economy. It tells us what the railroads are moving around the economy, and we've got that data, Julie.
Yeah. I mean, volume up overall. When you look at year over year, I think week over week, it's hard to look at those numbers because there's so much seasonality and calendar lineup and all of that. But year over year, up 2 point. I wish we had more time to digest it. It doesn't ever come out until we're on the
I
air,
know it
right?
does, but we do set Wednesday up, and this is sponsored by Trinity Rail. They're
2.9%.
rail car leasing, which is, I think, ideal because the railroads are absolutely killing it.
Yeah.
And next, by the way, next Tuesday, we have our virtual rail summit. Recommend you show up for that because we're going to hear from the STB chair as well as many of the railroad executives, Future of Rail Symposium, to talk about what the future of rail looks like. But what I love about the rail data and the railroads is they tell us a lot about the industrial economy. And at the Future Rail Summit, we're going to get into what the railroads are experiencing. Look, even though a lot of the executives that are coming have said, hey, I'm not going to talk about the merger, it's going to be in the room. Like it is the most important story. And intermodal is
In the virtual room.
What's that?
In the virtual room.
In the virtual room, it will be there. Are you with us, merger? But it absolutely be there. But I think if you look at this data, what I think is really interesting is you have three different countries.
Yes.
We have all these commodities. Intermodal has done well. J.B. Hunt obliterated their earnings report, and it was really intermodal that was driving it. You can see this in the data, and they continue to pump large intermodal traffic. But the thing that I think is most interesting is this contrast between United States, Canada, and Mexico, particularly in the backstop of the USMCA, the fact that the Trump administration says it's not going to renew it, and we have these tariffs that are taking place. Canada is certainly, of the three countries, the one that's struggling the most.
Yeah, and we looked at that, and we'll dig a lot deeper into this on Friday with Bill Stevens. But the thing that we talked about initially when we were looking at it over break and that stuck out to me was the motor vehicles and parts, right? So for U.S., up about 0.6%, so basically flat. For Mexico, up like 5%, and then down like 5%.
In Canada.
Yeah,
Canada's really struggling. But, if you look at the negotiation topics, Mexico was very, progressive, was very... they were really willing to work with the administration. I think the Canadians have been a bit more defiant about the negotiations, and I think that's upset the Trump administration, and that's really probably what's causing some of the tariff noise that we get, where the Mexican president has been much more willing to negotiate and try to get a deal that works for Mexico and the United States. But look, I think at the end of the day, there's nothing from this data that suggests that it's just the industrial economy is doing quite well.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the numbers for the U.S., it's up in every category but coal. In Canada, it is down in a few. Total intermodal units are down. Overall rail volumes are up, but obviously coal is down. Forest products are down. Metallic ores and motor vehicle parts are down. I found those interesting because we'd specifically talked about that with the new proposed tariffs in 30 days on some of those specific things, right? The vehicle parts and some of the metals.
We'll see what happens next week. I mean, I do believe you'll see some forward positioning. Some companies will try to move product across the border. So we probably will see some increase, and then I would imagine that we will see a pretty substantial drop in volumes as we end up in September, where those new tariffs are going to go into effect. I think it's August 19th is when they're actually effective. A 50% tariff on things like motor parts. So it's going to be very impactful to the auto sector specifically. And Canada has an enormous amount of commodities, but potash is exempt, as well as energy-related products. And so a lot of it's their manufacturing sector it's impacted. The Canadian manufacturing sector certainly is most exposed. Mexico seems to be on the right track, and you see that in the data.
Yeah, and then I think the headline number for the U.S. rail traffic is that overall intermodal units up 3.8% and total traffic up 3.4%. So to your point, all of that pointing in a direction of continued industrial strength, continuing to lead a robust and tight freight market based on the commodities. The reason I love the AAR report is because I love looking at it by commodity like this.
It's
so
great.
You can see what's coming.
It's fantastic. And it's industrial commodity, so it does tell us a lot about the industrial sector. Coal continues. Are you surprised because there's a lot of noise about coal, building, the reignition of coal plants, but the data suggests that coal is not coming back. I mean, it's in perpetual decline. It continues to decline. In fact, accelerating decline, which is different than some of the noise you hear. That's the reason I love the data. It doesn't have the noise.
Yeah, I don't know enough about it. I should write a sit rep about that.
You should.
Because then I'll learn something about it.
So our next guest is with Bloomberg Intelligence, and he is the industrials analyst that studies the OEM volume in terms of truck orders. We're going to hear from him shortly as we get into all of this market data. What do you think about Jason Miller's comments, Julie, about truck replacements? Do you buy that, or do you think that there's going to be an expansion?
So I would be cheating because I read the notes about what the Bloomberg Intelligence report says. I do not think there's going to be level expansion. He says,
so
I will be most interested to watch used truck prices and see what happens there, not just replenishment and new orders, as I think people will continue to hold on to trucks longer if they can, particularly if the maintenance costs don't go up astronomically for those trucks. So I was honestly surprised. I was aligned with Jason Miller on almost everything he said, other than probably that I think that this
idea that you're going to have expansion.
I think he thinks there's going to be a normalization in the market sooner that will be back to balanced. I think the tight freight market is going to last longer than what he.
I agree with you. Last time we had him on, the first time we had him on Freightways Today, he made the case that this is going to be a market that corrects really quickly. Like we're going to see correction. And I don't believe it. I think he's using it, like Jason Miller uses a lot of government data to draw his assessments, and he's using a lot of historical models to sort of understand that. But none of the channel checks that we do with the largest fleets, which are the most posed to benefit from a tight market, are able to get the drivers. A lot of them are saying they're not replacing. I mean, they're not expanding. They're all replacing. That's the general consensus. We're going to hear from Knight Swift tonight. What do you expect from Knight Swift?
I expect it to be strong earnings, right? They have strong earnings. They have a decent intermodal segment with the legacy Swift business, right? I think that as well as I think the LTL business will be strong. I think that they can perform in a regular route OTR environment as well or better than anyone else. That's always the hardest segment to make money on. I expect they're dedicated to be doing well, and they have a small warehousing as well.
Well, dedicated should do really well just from the liability, the idea that shippers are dealing with tight capacity combined with trying to mitigate their liability. You talked to Cassandra Gaines this week, who's an attorney has been around logistics, and now runs a software business that deals with fraud and risk management. She made the point on FreightWays Today that, the risk is going to shippers, and plaintiffs' attorneys are putting them in scope, which means dedicated becomes that much more traffic. You have a tight capacity environment combined with the idea that shippers want to have 1 degree separated liability. Dedicated is the perfect product for that.
Yeah, regarding that conversation and how we ended sort of talking with shippers, what my brain kept turning on for the rest of that afternoon and evening was that in some cases, shippers absolutely have to have skin in the game. And I don't mean I don't mean
plaintiff's attorney?
Yeah, and I don't mean from vetting the carriers, right? Like, fine, brokers need to vet the carriers and be responsible for that. The carrier needs to be responsible for providing a safe, compliant driver and service. But when it comes to fraud and who's actually showing up the gate to pick up your load, is it the driver that it is supposed to be? Is it the truck that it is supposed to be? Does that match? Are they leaving with the trailer they're supposed to leave with? And some of those controls might be in place at the dock, but I will tell you, I've been on a site at a lot of these facilities over the course of my career, and even at some dedicated on-site facilities that we had. And it is rare that a guard shack is easy to deal with. And not because they are trying to be compliant and ensure that you are the right truck or leaving with the right trailer, because they have no idea when it comes to the trailer numbers. They are verifying it's the right driver and going through your license and all that. But often the guard check employees are not employed by the actual shipper or the facility. It's like a security that is
the third party
contracted out. And
rent-a-cop,
to me, that's a big...
Is that, you're not allowed to say that?
I think you're allowed to say it. I just was trying to I don't know.
Be more PC.
Yeah.
This is not PC.
So the point is, to me, that's a massive breakdown. That has to be part of the process in mitigating liability when it comes to fraud and safety. Is it the right person showing up? Is it to ensure it's not a chameleon carrier, to ensure that there are other things that could have been red flags along the way, right?
This is where technology, and we got the chance, we went to Vegas. We went to see Samsara's. They talked a lot about that. It's our headline sponsor. And they have technology that can help fleets identify which trailer is associated with which loads, building AI around
where to find the trailer,
the intelligence. I think that's important. And the fleets that invest in those things are bringing a lot of value to their shippers.
I think it's really important, but I think you have to think about how to integrate that data between the actual carrier, the equipment owner, and the shipper, so that they understand that with whoever's managing their yard.
Yeah. Yard management is a huge piece of this, isn't it?
And even part of it, there's been OCR technology where they can scan the trailer numbers that's leaving and going and all that. But I think there's an inability for all of that to be integrated together right now. Yard management systems are not integrated with warehouse management systems, with transportation management systems in most cases. And that's where a lot of the breakdown happens. So.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. The other thing that I think we're going to hear tonight, U.S. Express is, Knight-Swift bought U.S. Express in 2023. Obviously, my family is involved in that, and still, just in terms of full disclosure, has retained some ownership of U.S. Express's business. But I do think this is really a part of the cycle where they now are going to benefit, because when they bought it in 23, and you were working there.
I was president of Dedicated when the acquisition happened, yeah.
Yeah, so Dedicated really well. That's a highly attractive product, but they haven't had the benefit of an upcycle. They bought it, one could argue, at the bottom. I mean, if we go back to May of 2023, which is when they closed on that transaction, that was the bottom. If you look at tender rejections, we're 2.5%. So they bought it at the bottom of the market. That's probably why the deal itself made sense for Knight's shareholders, because they had the benefit of a really down market to get the opportunity to buy a $2.5 billion company.
Yeah.
That probably wouldn't have been on the market otherwise. And I mean, I know it wouldn't have been on the market otherwise. But they haven't had the benefit of the cycle to really drive the improvements. And they've made improvements, but not really benefited from the upper end of the market.
Yeah, and I would also say that they've had the appropriate amount of time since the transaction now to make the improvements, to be prepared for an upcycle in this sort of market. And I will tell you that my guess is that, as well as anyone, they manage tender acceptance really well and understand what to take and what not to take.
They're very disciplined.
Incredibly disciplined about that, and understanding customer commitments and not giving more than what you've committed to at a depressed rate. So what I don't know, what the wild card for me will be the brokerage. I don't know what that will look like.
Look, I think if we look at,
Because I don't know how much freight sharing they're doing in this case, or how much freight that they just don't want on their assets that they're pushing
Julie,
off on brokerage. So
we saw it in JB Hunt's earnings, not a great, really
expect it to be
great
that.
opportunity in brokerage. And they have JB Hunt has a large, and they probably do it as well as any asset-based carrier. But the problem is that the brokerage business and assets, we always said this when at US Express, is the red truck wins. And everyone who works in an asset-based brokerage kind of knows
you have fixed costs associated with that.
your
You have
primary
to keep those moving.
goal is to serve the truck. And so brokerage is a relief valve in some ways for shippers, for carriers to provide shippers with relief. There's more important, bigger opportunities. So I don't know that I would expect much, but I do expect their over-the-road business, and they have made improvements. If you look at the US Express performance since they've owned it, they've made significant improvements to the operations since they've done it. One of the things that when Knight and Swift first merged, and this was happening when Freightways, very early in our business, the conversation was about the fact that Swift, one of their biggest clients, if not, I think it was their biggest client, was Walmart. And Walmart, Knight was not doing business with Walmart. And one of the really interesting things was this sort of concern that Walmart had about the fact that Knight, who had been viewed as this very disciplined, would not go out of route to chase freight, was being bought by Swift, that was the opposite business model. And the idea that these two companies would come together, you had a highly disciplined operator in Knight. You had a company that was sort of I like to call it the Walmart of trucking. It was wanting a lot of volume, big shippers, big volume, was less discriminate in what freight it took. It brought a lot of sort of scale to it. And then all of a sudden you see Knight owning it as having conversation with some of Swift's largest customers. I was not in that room. This was prior to the time that you worked at that organization. I imagine there was a lot of conversations and a lot of tough conversations with shippers and the orgs.
Yeah, but I think that part of that is not just the business discipline that Knight has always had to be very strict and stick to their network, but also the mix of the segments of their business, right? So Knight doesn't have a large dedicated footprint.
Did not.
Swift
obviously does now.
As a standalone.
Yeah.
Swift does, US Express does. That forces you into more of those relationships with those Walmarts, with those retailers, those massively, high volume, and you have those enterprise level relationships then where you're doing massive dedicated business with them. You're going to do over the road business with them as well, and understand how to really have a good partnership.
There's also a different operating business because it's interesting if you look at the length of haul. I know we used to track this.
It's highly regional for Knight.
US Express had a long length of haul. Swift had sort of a medium length of haul, 500 miles. US Express in the early days was, when I was there, was 700, 800 miles because of the dedicated team stuff. Now that came down a lot. But then you had Knight was in the 200 miles. And so the problem is, or the issue is, if you're running, you have to be so disciplined if you're only going 200 miles because the amount of what you're getting paid for those 200 miles doesn't offer you a lot of flexibility. So if you go way out of route to collect a load, to get a load and deadhead to pick it up.
Well, that deadhead percentage is huge immediately on that.
Then all of a sudden you have a problem. And I think that is interesting because what you now have with Knight Swift and US Express is you have this sort of book-ended business. Now, US Express's length of haul has come down significantly from the days when Team was really driving it. By the way, I'm just curious because I don't know that I know this number. What was the team operation when you left US Express? How many teams were there?
I don't know, but not that. It had gone
at
way
one point,
down.
US Express had the largest set of teams in the entire country. It was US Express, Covenant, and CRST. Thousands of teams. That was when I was there. And that came down a lot. I don't know what that number was. Teams became really hard. And it was really husband and wife teams.
And I would be guessing, but I mean, it maybe 250. I mean, it had fallen
really
significantly, but that might be totally wrong. I can't remember. It's been years, and I intentionally stay a little bit removed from it now.
You're now out of the business. You've forgotten all that you had.
I lived a whole life since then, I feel like.
I know, we've all lived a life. We live a life every day here at Freightways Today. Our next guest is going to tell us about OEM orders, because he is the person that knows. Chris, Julie and I have been talking about whether or not this cycle is going to go on for a long time. And I think a lot of it depends on how fast trucking companies expand their fleet. Lots of questions about that. You are the man with the answers. How you doing, sir?
Doing well. Yeah, I mean, orders have been remarkably strong to start 2026. Even at the end of 25, we're running at a 400,000 plus 6-month annualized rate, with demand far exceeding supply. So we are seeing strengthening freight markets. You have obviously the pre-buy, but ahead of the EPA 2027 regs. So really, a lot of positive momentum heading into the back half of this year.
So the question, I think on at least we've been asking the question today, how much of this is fleet expansion versus the fact that they were not adding and replacing their trucks over the last couple of years?
Yeah, I think it's more the latter. Typically what we've seen is you typically need GDP growth above that 2% threshold to really kind of induce a lot of that fleet expansion. I do think there's a lot of pent up demand coming out of the last few years, running at relatively low build rates. So I think that's the larger story here. But now as you begin to see the industrial economy recover, I think that will lend itself to fleet expansion, particularly as we look into next year.
I mean, the big question, I think, we're doing a number of channel checks with large fleets. The big thing the trend that keeps coming up in those conversations is we would love to expand our fleets if we could find truck drivers. And the challenges in this market is just driver availability. This regulatory compliance crackdown is taking drivers out of the market. They're not finding drivers are easy to come by. Therefore, why would they add trucks if they can't find people to actually drive them?
Yeah, I mean, it's the $1 million question, right? I mean, a lot of the improvement you've seen in the freight markets has been from that supply or capacity coming out of the market. I think just now you're beginning to see that strength broaden out from a demand side. I still think it's very early innings here, but to your point, it really has been driven by the lack of capacity in the market that has driven this improvement in freight rates.
So you mentioned the really strong orders and all of that all around. I think I read in the report that something alluding to the fact that regulatory and geopolitical uncertainty and instability are keeping some buyers on the sideline despite this sort of pent-up demand. As you mentioned, those have not been replacing their trucks in this down cycle. So do you expect that to change now that we get into the second half of 2026, or do you think that uncertainty will remain into 2027?
Yeah, no, I think things are headed in the right direction. And to your point, so we put out our 2Q commercial vehicle dealer survey. And I think maybe the big surprise to me was that dealers are still very cautious about current market conditions, despite this kind of order exuberance we've seen over the last 6 to 7 months. But what we are seeing is that they are a little bit more optimistic about the future. 48% of dealers are expecting the market to improve over the next 12 months, and that's up nearly 460 basis points from our 1Q survey. So I think that growing order book, the backlog really underpin a lot of that optimism as we look forward here over the next year and into 2027.
Chris, but how much of the lack of excitement is just because we've been burned so many times? I mean, look, if anyone has been wrong on the recovery, rest in peace, freight recession 2024. I got that one wrong. I own it. I know it. But I think one of the challenges is that everyone is reluctant to call recovery because you don't know how long it's going to take. And I think we're all a little bit in disbelief.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at, so the orders again have been very, very strong. So I think that does support this recovery, not only through the balance of this year. Bill slots are essentially filled. So you place an order now, you're not getting delivery for another 7+ months. So we're already talking kind of end of 1Q 2027. So I think we are on a solid footing, at least as we look out here over the next 6 months. I think OEMs have been very diligent about, gradually increasing build rates. We saw orders build throughout the first half of the year. But they had been very disciplined about, maintaining that production schedule and cadence. Just now, these last 2 months, we're really starting to see build rates improve sequentially. I suspect you're going to see that throughout the back half of the year as well. So 26 is largely spoken for. We think we'll probably end up just shy of roughly 300,000 units on the Class 8 side. 27 becomes a little bit more of a wild card in terms of how much of that pull forward occurred in 26 due to the EPA pre-buy. We still think it's going to be a very healthy market in 27. Just look at where, GDP expectations are, industrial production expectations are for next year. It still points to a very healthy economic growth, which should support underlying freight demand.
I think we want to dig a little bit more into the orders and the volatility there and cancellations, but I also want to ask about used truck sales and sort of the sentiment that the dealers you surveyed had there. I think that I read that while inventories, sales remained flat, prices were up on used trucks, and that inventories are relatively low. So what do you anticipate to continue to happen there, and what do you think is driving flat sales but pricing up?
Yeah, so it's a little bit of a mixed bag on the used side. Overall, I would say that the used market has been improving. You're right, we did see a little bit more of a muted impact in terms of used sales during the quarter, according to our survey, but pricing did improve. We're seeing inventories continue to come down, which will be positive for values moving forward. Some of the data that we look at in the used market, it's a little bit of a diverging story between Class 8 sleepers and day cabs. Sleepers, we continue to see inventories trend down, which should support higher used values throughout the balance of the year. Day cab, we're kind of hovering right around the historical averages there. So not as much of an improvement, but still trending in the right direction.
So Chris,
And do you think? Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Do you think that sort of continued low inventory on the sleepers is because larger fleets are holding on to their used equipment for longer due to tariffs and engine pricing and other uncertainty? Do you think that they're not sure about the market yet? Do you think it's because they can't hire drivers? Why do you think some of those larger fleets are holding on to their trucks longer, and then that is obviously creating less used truck availability?
Yeah, so I think it's a combination of all of those. It is interesting in some of the commentary we heard from dealers, they raised that exact same question, that the larger fleets in particular are just not turning in the used equipment in the volume that they normally would or anticipated. And I think a lot of that, or part of that, has to do with tariffs. Part of it has to do with what the engine pricing is going to be under the new EPA regs. And there, has been this, on again, off again uncertainty from a geopolitical standpoint and an economic standpoint. So I think all that has contributed to a little bit of a hesitation when it comes to trading in equipment and even making new purchases. Just the broad uncertainty in the market is really just an absolute killer when it comes to making capital equipment investments. I think we're kind of towards the tail end with some of those. So maybe we see some of that unlocked here in the back half of the year.
Chris, where do all these drivers that are getting pulled over and put out of service that the government, our data is suggesting and we're hearing, what's happening to the trucks? Because I would have thought there would be this glut of used trucks on the market, but that's not what your data says.
No, we're not seeing that, and part of it is a reflection of the production that we have seen over the last few years, where we've been at pretty low levels coming out of 24. So we didn't have this big overbuy and a lot of used trucks then trickling down to the used market. So I think that has helped keep some of these inventories under control. If you look on the new equipment side, inventories are still historically elevated. That's one of the, I would say, lingering concerns that we still have out there. Retail demand has been somewhat sluggish to start the year, although I think we are moving in the right direction there. So there is, I would say, excess inventory on the new side. Used tends to be in a little bit better situation.
What about bonus depreciation, any of the tax incentives, is that driving any behavior, or is it all total cost of ownership and economics?
So it does help. I would kind of rank it maybe 4 or 5 on the list of reasons why you would go out and buy a truck. At the end of the day, it ultimately comes down to freight demand, right? You buy a truck to move freight. So if the underlying economy is growing and fleets are expanding, you're going to go out and make some of those capital equipment purchases. That is the ultimate and primary driver. The bonus depreciation certainly does help, but I would even throw in some of the EPA regulations ahead of that now. But it seems that we have clarity there, and hopefully now businesses are able to plan and operate accordingly.
Now, what about the light vehicle market, light trucks? Those have done better. Is that related to the tax policy, or is this driven by just the overall economy and some of the industrial activity that's doing better?
Yeah, it tends to be more economically driven. We have seen like class 6, 7, I would say expectations really aren't that different from what we're seeing on the class 8 side this year. We're still looking for, near 20% growth in builds, and 27 should be another decent year as well. So, typically we haven't seen that much of a tight correlation. Class 8 obviously much more cyclical, but those two markets have seemed to converge as we think about 26.
Julie and I were talking before you came on air about the private fleet market, the dedicated truck operations, the shipper liability question that's really on the minds of a lot of our customers, both broker and shipper liability. Are you seeing, as well as just the overall tightness in the freight market, are you seeing private fleets play a significant role here in terms of order demand?
It's hard to tell. I would say, at least in terms of our survey, we probably don't have that granular level of detail. These are anonymous surveys, so we don't have the specifics and the composition of the fleets and who exactly is placing what orders. But it is certainly a concern that we've heard, throughout the industry, through some of our due diligence.
Yeah, I mean, imagine we were talking about dedicated being so much more attractive because it provides one level of insulation. Tight freight market combined with, hey, I want to have a degree of separation. It helps those dedicated contract services. And Julie knows that well. She ran a large dedicated fleet. Chris, is Tesla a factor in any of this? Or is it just noise right now? Are we going to see the Tesla Semi really take hold in the market?
You know what? We heard the announcement. I've lost track how many years ago it actually came out.
It was 2017, by the way, because
exactly.
I think FreightWaves was very early. It might have been 18, actually, now I think about it. I know Nikola came out in 16. I think it was 17. I think it was late 17. We got invited to go, and I think Elon talked about 200,000 trucks by 2022. A couple hundred, maybe?
I don't even know if we're at that level, at least in terms of the registration data we see. Right, it's just noise at this point. Listen, at some point, I do expect them to be a more have a larger presence in this market. But for right now, we're really just not seeing interest in adoption when it comes to electric vehicles, particularly for long haul Class 8. There's a number of headwinds still in the way in terms of improving, the battery size, the power that's going to be required, and to meet the length of haul. We also have, from a regulatory standpoint, and there seems to be obviously a de-emphasis on some of the cleaner technologies now. So at some point we will see more of an interest in terms of EVs and potentially fuel cell on the Class 8 side. But for now, it's quite minimal. And really from some of the orders that we've seen in terms of battery electric, they continue to remain very soft after a little bit of a pop initially. But again, very, very weak numbers in terms of electric demand here in North America.
So Chris, I'm going to punish you with a question I get asked by everybody who asks about trucking is autonomous trucks. Where are they at? What are you seeing? I know you get asked this question all the time because I certainly do. What is the state of autonomous driverless trucks in the OEM world?
Yeah, there continues to be a tremendous amount of investment, and I think it's a significant opportunity in the intermediate to longer term. We continue to move forward toward, level 4 autonomy. We're starting to hear the OEMs talk more and more about it, starting to put out some longer term revenue targets, particularly in Volvo's case. So I would say it is growing in terms of the momentum behind it, but we're still, I think, quite a ways out. I think we're probably looking towards the end of this decade or early 2030s before you begin to see that become a meaningful contributor to some of the OEMs' the financials.
Well, they've been investing a lot. The OEMs themselves, Volvo has talked about the fact they want to have a fully autonomous platform by next year, by 2027. So it is, we've covered a number of those OEM investments. It's going to be interesting to watch, to see where we end up in the autonomous world, Julie.
Yeah. Yes, I think there's a lot of things that have to fall into place still.
We cover it often, but I was going to ask Chris, because I don't get to ask a lot of people who are getting asked these questions. Tariffs are obviously a big deal. Last year, we saw the heavy duty tariffs put on trucks. You have the USMCA. I don't know if we call that the end of USMCA or these auto tariffs. What are you hearing from the OEMs about all the tariff noise, and how are buyers thinking about pricing tariff into their truck purchases?
Yeah, so it's very fluid still. I would say this quarter, particularly in 2Q, you're probably looking at another quarter of headwinds for the OEMs in terms of tariffs. What we are beginning to see, not even just within trucks, but within broader U.S. machinery, is that you're starting to get some of the refunds trickling through. You had Volvo, who already reported their 2Q results, call out that they will receive a tariff refund that they expect in 3Q, which is expected to actually fully offset their tariff headwind for the quarter. So I do think that the tariff story, at least, is going to moderate here, particularly in the back half of the year. Obviously, things still change pretty rapidly. But all else being equal, I would anticipate that we're going to hear more and more tariff refunds as this quarter progresses. And then as we look into 27, what the administration has in place in terms of, re-implementing some of the tariffs that had been rolled back, I would anticipate that's going to add some incremental cost headwinds. Again, to what degree and what magnitude remains to be seen. What I think is going to be interesting, though, to watch is that the way that the Section 232 tariffs have been constructed, particularly on the heavy and medium duty truck side and the parts, is that it really puts two of the OEMs at a significant advantage from a manufacturing footprint standpoint, Volvo and PACCAR. They essentially manufacture nearly all of their U.S. Class 8 trucks domestically here, while Triton and Daimler, have, north of 70% of production still down in Mexico. So it does create an interesting paradigm where we think, the PACCARs and the Volvos of the world have an opportunity to either A, I would say, protect their margin profiles, or two, gain market share because of this more domestic manufacturing footprint. So it'll be interesting to see how they balance those two. Do they try to pick up a little more share? Do they try to protect margins? That's going to be, I think, an interesting story to watch as the next year or two unfold.
Well, I know International, I talked to the CEO, they're very proud of their San Antonio production. We're going to be down there and feature, actually, interviewing the CEO of International Motors about what they're doing down in Texas, South Texas, as they ramp up production. So I think it's incredibly interesting to watch. Chris, really appreciate your time today. Someone who has the pulse on equipment sales, and that's really important to understand the cycle. Appreciate you being with us, Chris.
Thank you.
So coming up next, we have Aaron Graff, who's going to tell us about the freight market and what Triumph saw this quarter in their own business and the overall freight market. Stay with us.
In today's supply chain, every mile and every minute matters. Shippers, lessors, and railroads count on performance they can trust. That's where Trinity Rail delivers. With integrated railcar solutions including manufacturing, maintenance, parts, fleet management, and leasing, helping you reduce downtime, optimize your fleet, and stay ahead of demand. Because efficiency isn't a goal, it's a competitive edge. Trinity Rail, built to deliver.
Doesn't wait, so neither do they. Wheels on the interstate, boots on the site, hands on the shipment. We build for the world out here, and we build it with the people who live it. Ideas from the field, made real by world-class R&D to keep the operation sharp, the front lines safe, and the world moving. From one cab to a global network, billions of miles, trillions of data points, every one making your operation better. And we never build it alone. Samsara, built with operators.
Getting reliable capacity can be complicated. Let RXO make it simple. As the third largest provider of brokered transportation in North America, RXO has the scale, resources, and expertise to help you tackle any shipping challenge. From a last-minute spot load to a managed transportation solution, from LTL to intermodal, from trained logistics experts to AI-powered freight automations, RXO has you covered from the first mile to the last mile. Start shipping on easy mode with RXO and get a smart solution to move your freight. Learn more at rxo.com/capacity. And freight, again, your customer experience is everything. Every quote, order, and status update is a chance to win or lose a customer, but that will still, again, run on manual disconnected systems. Pallet is the leading enterprise AI built for the supply chain, automating costly operations from code to cash across brokerages, carriers, forwarders, shippers, and warehouses. Mallory Alexander serves 3 times more customers per operator, deliver an exceptional customer experience at scale. Visit them right now at pallet.com.
Well, Aaron Graff, the CEO and founder of Triumph, one of the most important financial institutions to serve the trucking industry, particularly the brokerage industry, is with us today. First of all, Aaron, I got to say congratulations are in order. You guys absolutely killed this quarter. Congrats to the Triumph team and what you guys have been doing over there.
Thanks, Craig. Appreciate you having us. And after 4 years of running against the treadmill, it's kind of nice for it to reverse course and carry you along. I'd almost forgotten what that felt like.
We all have. It's been a miserable winter. We're out of winter. It's spring. I think the question that we've been asking, even talking about today, and our prior guests talked about it, is this question about how long does this cycle last? I know you don't have a crystal ball, but do you have a perspective on whether this cycle is going to go on for a while, or we're going to, we can't have nice things in trucking?
You know, as a younger man in the last cycle in 2021, I made some bold predictions that were incredibly wrong. So I think one of the things when you get older, you should get a little wiser. And you more than anyone nailed this, and we're bold enough to step out and make the call on this cycle. What's different, and I wrote about it in the letter, and I'm not the only person to say this, you see this, but this is a supply-driven market, and I don't see an antidote to litigation, regulation, legislation, risk that's just going to allow capacity to flood in the way we saw it happen last time. So it feels more structural. We know it's a cyclical business, and who's to say when it would end, but it feels like it has more legs perhaps than what we've seen in the past.
Yeah, I think that certainly aligns with what we've been saying and thinking. The barriers to entry have certainly risen for those, so it's going to be significantly harder to add more capacity. But let's talk a little bit about state of freight demand right now, where you sit inside the data, what you're seeing overall. I know you said you don't want to talk about how long it's going to last, but can you give us some headline numbers on...
He's not going to be so bold to come out. He's a public CEO. He's got to be careful because his stock trades like a trucking stock versus a bank. It's a bank that seems to headline more with how the trucking, in tandem with the trucking operators than the banks do.
But I think there's probably some really good examples of how strong the market is right now and some indicators in your data to back that up.
Sure. I mean, here's something that surprised me and didn't surprise me. So the average invoice size in our factoring business, which is 15% or more of the entire market, is up 26%. Now, with all the headlines we heard, and to have seen that, what I would have expected is our customer count to constrict. But for all the reasons we've talked about, people being put out of service, brokers not tendering freight to carriers who don't meet heightened compliance standards, et cetera. And what we actually saw is we grew customers in the quarter by 4%, and we didn't see a lot of our long-term customers disappear. We certainly had some go inactive, and I can't tell you why they did or didn't go inactive. And so the first thing I would say to you, what the data says is the market is tighter. What I don't at least have the data to point you to is who exactly left to create the tightness. I know it happened. We saw less freight tendered to owner-operators, our 1 to 4 segment. But I can't point you to a bunch of people leaving the system, but they must have, because demand didn't go up and supply obviously tightened to drive that sort of quarter-over-quarter increase.
Every channel check we do talking to the largest carriers are telling us how tight the freight market is in terms of recruiting. We had a very large motor carrier said it's been around for decades. One of the largest, has all the advantages, said it's the tightest recruiting market in their entire history. It says a lot for anyone who's been around trucking. And I think, Aaron, the question there is, to your point, the cycle, if you can't get drivers, you're not adding trucks, because nobody wants to have unseated trucks.
Right.
Which I think makes the case that the cycle is going to go on a lot longer than I think some of the folks who have been around it for a while would otherwise think.
Yeah, and you know, in the last cycle, and in every cycle I've seen in this industry, it was he who had the cheapest capacity would win, right? You would put somebody in the truck. I mean, think about what we've lived through in these last few years. Is they would put unqualified, undocumented, unverified people into trucks and almost treat them like indentured servants, which is good for no one. It's not good for highway safety. It's not good for the people being taken advantage of. Now it's so different. I mean, clearly we have what the government's doing, and then we have what the plaintiff's bar is doing and will do, and some of that's good, but it's also very difficult as a business owner when you're getting paid $2,000 to move freight, or paying $2,000 to move freight, to wrap your head around the fact that you might be staring at a $30 million verdict on the back end of it, despite the best efforts you use. Like, it's added this, what we are calling the defensibility of who you hire. And I know you and many others are onto this. And so you're right. I mean, it's one thing to say we didn't see a lot of motor carriers surrender their licenses, at least the ones we do business with, their registration. But it's another thing to say the demand is out there to go get freight at revenue that would be accretive to their bottom line above their cost of capital, but they can't find a qualified driver to put in the seat. And that's a different thing than we've seen in the last several years.
Well, immigration is the relief valve. I mean, that's really what's enabled fleets. And we've been talking about it since I was a young boy in trucking, is just how tight the average age of truck drivers of the traditional demographic is older and older. And then what I don't think anyone really expected was the massive explosion of, unregistered folks that took advantage of the lack of compliance, the lack of standards, and frankly, the proliferation of freight brokers to provide freight access to these operators. But many of these operators were off the radar. I mean, it's interesting because when the non-domiciled CDL conversation started popping up, I was talking to a lot of CEOs of the largest carriers. They weren't even aware of the term non-domiciled CDL. It never registered them. Very few of them believed it was a real factor.
Yeah, you're totally right. And if you're a shipper who is moving freight, you have to ask yourself, unless it was high value freight, like what was your duty of inquiry beyond the freight broker? I mean, you hired a freight in the instances where you're using brokers, they're the experts, they're on the ground, they're sourcing capacity, licensed capacity, and there was really no need to extend I mean, I'm sure certain people did, but generally speaking, liability stopped there. And we all know what happened with the Montgomery case. We see what's happening. And so now everybody is paying attention. And when everybody pays attention, it gets harder to operate in the gray areas. And that's what we're seeing. I mean, the numbers clearly support that with the kind of move we've seen. I mean, diesel explains part of it, but it does not explain all of it. And I just don't see, if we're going to operate in a black and white environment where the cost of doing business is higher and the risk to not meeting that standard is even higher, I don't see how we fall back into the gray area anytime soon.
Yeah, I agree. I want to talk a little bit about more about brokerage, and I believe it's true that both your shipment volume and number of invoices, processed, your invoice volume were both up. In addition to, you mentioned earlier, the revenue per invoice being up. What did you see when it came to actually brokerage margin and how they are faring over the last quarter with capacity being tighter, even with spot rates going up from the shipper side?
Sure. Well, in Q1, we saw margin compress because all the contracts broke down. And then in Q2, we saw something interesting happen. And this is where the real world is often more interesting than those of us who sit around and opine and predict. The total gross dollars that a broker was earning per load went up because the load size went up more than their margin compressed. And if you think about that, right, it's the question of, if historically I made 15% on a $1,500 load, well, that's going to be $225 of revenue. If I make 10% on a $3,000 load, my percentage margin went down, but my gross dollars went up. And when you run a business and you have expenses you have to meet at the end of every month, payroll you have to make, percentages are lovely, but it's gross dollars that matter. So because so much freight spilled over into the spot market and the spot market gapped out, even though broker margins compressed to between 10 and 12% for those that we track, the actual dollars they were recognizing per load went up.
So Aaron, one of the things that I think is interesting that you made clear in your comments, John Kingston, our reporter who covers Triumph, pointed out, is that we all benefit when the freight market is doing better. Triumph is one of those beneficiaries as well. But you also made the point to remind your investors that a lot of the improvements you guys have made have been specific to your business and are not just market driven. Tell us a little bit about those improvements that you guys feel like it really highlights the operating improvements, the unit economics improvements that you guys have made.
Yeah, I look, if you followed Triumph's journey, what comes naturally to us, or at least what's come naturally to me, is being creative and trying to use what we built to solve difficult problems that banks never tried to solve before. But at some point, you scale that business to a size where instead of just using technology as doing the next creative thing, we need to harness that technology to make sure we're delivering an incredible customer experience and creating operating leverage. And you and I both lived through the last cycle when people were like, spend faster, spend more, do more. And it's our job to hear that, but not be persuaded by that. And so what we've done is improved our processes. We've upskilled several positions, and we've used technology to create a dislocation between, as revenue is growing, as more invoices are coming in, we're not just throwing people at the problem, because that's not the way you create sustainable margin that lasts through the cycle. And so we've done that. I mean, we've probably eliminated 30 million plus of inefficiencies in the business. We've reinvested some of that into things that we think are going to be revenue producing. And it's been a very healthy experience for us. And it was frankly brought on by a market that was so soft that you had to quit looking outside and you needed to look more inside and find the margin there.
Yeah, it is amazing. Julie and I have talked about this just in our own business, how much better, because we're all forced to make sacrifices, we'll call it, or change the way we think of it, get the business lean and mean, how much better you're positioned as the market recovers, because you're not having to add those costs back. AI, these automation tools that are available has made it so much easier to grow the business without adding humans. And I think that's a testament that certainly shows up in your data.
Mm-hmm.
And there's really not a more, I think, or taxing part of the freight market in terms of human touches than factoring. I mean, that's a part of the business. I was shocked when I came out to Dallas and just saw how many people manage invoices, because the expectation is that factoring should be a pretty easy business, but historically you guys have had large teams of people that have been required to manage it. What are you seeing in terms of improvements that you're able to use technology to lower the amount of human touches that you have in a factored invoice?
Yeah, well, let me be clear. We still have large teams of talented people, and I think we will forever. My goal is for those people to be talented and empowered in a way that we can continue to grow our factoring business without making that team bigger. But the complexity, the amount of revenue we generate per invoice is somewhere around $25. So every time you touch it, you're losing. Right? We're not talking about tons of margin to go around. We're talking about something that you have to get incredibly efficient at touching something where you're only making $25 in order to do it at scale on a repeated basis. So yeah, I mean, something you wouldn't think about unless you did this for a living. We have an incredible team doing cash application. Imagine a large broker sending us a payment weekly of $10 or $15 million that needs to be applied across 3,700 invoices belonging to 2,000 clients, and you got to go do that $2,000 at a time. Like, that is an incredibly manual, difficult process, and you've got to do it immediately because you've got to apply that cash so your customer can see that the payment came in. And those are the areas where we think automation should materially change the way we do business. And it's just a high volume business that unless you live it and you understand we're trying to get payments out in the same hour that the invoice comes in when we can, it just never stops.
So Aaron, coming off of your earnings call last night, which parts of your business are you seeing the most strength in right now? And then conversely, where are you seeing the most pressure?
Factoring and payments are doing great. Factoring, of course, that revenue is highly indexed to what the average invoice size is, and the average invoice size is perfectly correlated to what revenue per mile is. So that's doing great. Payments continues to scale. We touch 65% of all brokered freight. One thing you all might find interesting, we resized the market. There is no perfect measure of what the truckload brokerage market is. When we talk about the size of the market, we're talking about what brokers pay out, not what they charge. And we took it from 110 billion to 135 billion just because everything has inflated. So that business, we're still touching 65% of invoices, I think doing 54 billion in annualized payments. And so that business is doing great. The things that have gone more slowly, our intelligence business, I think we're excited about the products we have, but it's one of those businesses where I think the customer base, there's only so many vendors they want to deal with, and you've got to distinguish your value proposition to them. I mean, you know this. In order to scale that business. And so we've taken more time than I thought to build the products we need for enterprise intelligence. I'm excited about where we are and where we're going from here, but among our transportation-related businesses, that is certainly the slowest growth.
All right, Aaron, I'm not going to let you out of that since you teed it up just scot-free here.
Sure.
You made a big transaction last year. You guys bought Green Screens. It has, in terms of what you paid, big number. By the way, thank you for that, because we like big comps in our industry. As someone who has Sonar, we do compete, in fairness. So my questions are certainly biased in some ways. But in terms of what you paid, where you guys are at in terms of the size of that business today, hasn't really grown year over year. What is the story for the old Green Screens or Triumph Intelligence business?
Yeah, I think Green Screens did a lot of things well. Green Screens was really good at selling to the SMB market of brokerage. Triumph is good, and where we live is in the enterprise market. And so what we had to do, and we knew this was going to happen, we needed to change the go-to-market strategy to meet the needs of an enterprise player. All right, so that takes a certain amount of time. It has taken longer than I would have liked. So, Craig, I've done a lot of deals since I've got into banking. Some deals we bought great. Some deals we bought average. Some deals work out faster than you think, although that very rarely happens, and some deals work out more slowly than you think. And I mean, nobody's hiding the ball. I think that's true of us in intelligence. But I continue to believe that the industrial logic of using the data we have to give insights back to our customers works. And I do believe in the products that we have announced and where we're going. But at the end of the day, my belief only carries us so far. It's got to show up in the numbers, and we don't hide it. We lean into it. Just like we celebrate our successes, we own things that aren't going as quickly as we'd like, but that doesn't change what I think the long-term value proposition is. And so we're committed to go get that.
Well, I think, I mean, you should get a ton of credit for what you guys have done in your payments business. I mean, EBITDA margins improvement up 14% year over year in terms of 26% year over year. Load pay is something that is, I think, is really caught on. What exactly is load pay for those that aren't familiar with it?
Yeah, I mean, it started as the idea of Venmo for trucking, but it's expanded into a digital business companion for truckers. So it's a place where a trucker can go to consolidate their workflows if they need to upload factoring invoices, if they want to see about equipment finance. It's a virtual wallet for their card. And since it's connected to the back end of our network, we can fund 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So we don't depend on ACH rails. We don't charge wire fees. We can move money instantaneously. And so when you couple that, the fact that we can do that because it lives inside the walls of our bank, with the fact that our distribution network involves everyone from C.H. Robinson, to several of our partners who are, prefer to pay via load pay to their carriers, that's a compelling proposition. It's a great product. It gets you instant liquidity, and it's a preferred provider for many of the large vendors, and that's why I think it's positioned to grow.
Revenue up 49% for the quarter. I mean, that's a fantastic growth trajectory. Obviously, being a bank, you're managing money, and being a bank certainly helps you guys do that for people that can trust that it is going to be safe. You've got the compliance and regulatory elements that you get the luxury of dealing with, having the regulators, but that gives people confidence in the fact that their money is going to be safe.
Credibility.
And I think in this market, with all the fraud going on, I want to know my money's safe.
Yep.
Like, it's really important. Aaron, I got to ask, outlook for the rest of the year. How are you guys feeling about the market in terms of perspectives on the balance of the year?
Well, I'm just following the Craig Fuller forecast, right? I mean, I'm rooting. You've been right. I think that, and you and I have talked about this, I think the market's better than people think or fear or predict. There are certainly weak patches in it, but there are strong things that are strong. I think it's a very brittle market right now. So any uptick in demand, there's not a lot of available, properly verified, defensible capacity to haul it. So I think that the market risks another leg upwards. In the absence of that return of demand, I still think the market stays strong. And I just want to point out, everybody's like, well, the invoice prices are up 26% quarter over quarter or whatever percent year over year. If this is a healthy marketplace, then the revenue per mile or the average invoice size ought to be at a level where a small carrier can earn their cost of capital while complying with legislation and regulation. And it hasn't lived there for 4 years.
Amen.
So I get it that the numbers look like they're up a lot, but if you inflation adjust those numbers, if you allow for what diesel's done, equipment input costs, small carriers still are not pocketing a lot of money here.
Aaron, you're exactly right. And we have a regulator, the FMCSA and DOT, that are actually watching the freight market data. I mean, they are now a subscriber to Sonar, tracking the rates, tracking the market. And what they will say, very similar to the STB, what they'll say is, we want motor carriers to make a profit because we want the ones that are compliant to be profitable. We want the market to be healthy because we know if it's healthy, it will be safe and secure. That is directly from Derek Barr's own words. And it's unusual to have a regulator Tracking Trucking that cares about the freight market, which I think is pretty remarkable. Sean Duffy and the Louisville Truck Show said the same thing. And I think that's why you got to make the bull case on the market that this cycle is not going to turn over anytime soon. I think the fact that the regulators care about where the market is and market health is something we have not enjoyed, frankly, forever.
Forever.
Well, Aaron, thank you so much. Congratulations on a fantastic quarter. I think a lot of confidence in what you guys are doing there in Dallas. We'll have to come visit. We've talked about that.
Yeah, Dallas.
I do love going to Dallas. So, Aaron,
Don't
appreciate it.
come in July.
Oh gosh, yeah. Let's wait until it cools off. Yeah.
We got to do it. I got to go to the Baylor. You know, he's a Baylor Bear. Aaron, that's one of the smartest executives in the space. All the smart executives go to Baylor or went to Baylor. So all of them. Well, appreciate it. Tomorrow, we got a great show. We're going to get a chance to talk to Josh Feldon. He is the SVP of Operations for J.B. Hunt. There's nobody that knows more about the cycles in trucking than Josh does. He's just a fantastic. He's been throughout that organization, one of the largest and most important motor carriers, intermodal operators, and logistics operators in trucking. Josh is going to give us his perspective on what they're seeing, what they've seen. We got the earnings reports. He's going to be able to give us some additional context. We also have the CEO and founder of Integrated Multimodal Solutions, Paul Tonsager is going to be here. And then Friday, stick around. We've got Paul Spindlin going to tell us what they're seeing on the international front and hear, a lot about the stories of a turnaround specialist that's gone from STG to Celadon. He was at the former Pacer business, so a lot to talk about.
Yeah, and one last plug. You don't want to miss F3. F3, the Future Freight Festival, is Freight Tech's main stage. The leaders you need, the access and connections you won't get anywhere else. Use promo code TAKE20 for 20% off of current pricing. Again, it's TAKE20, TAKE20. Register now. We hope to see you there in October.
Watson with Freight Waves, and we are having our latest edition of the Lean Quarterly Dive. We're catching up with the folks at Lean Solutions Group and Alfonso, talking about AI and technology, how it works, how you should use it. Gonna be a great conversation here. Super excited to be diving in, so let's get to it. I'm gonna welcome on Alfonso. Sir, pleasure to get to speak with you for the first time. Before we begin with this edition, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Thank you, Thomas.